Hi, three moral panics. Sex and drugs come together in rock and roll, which is one reason many people go into it. So, good evening, London! Good evening, New York! Good evening, Tokyo! Delete as applicable. Rock and roll contains its own mini history of moral panics. Gyrating hips. Long hair. Outrageous clothes. Delete as applicable. But now acts of rebellion are neatly packaged and sold to consumers of lifestyles. John Lennon wrote, "Imagine, no possessions," and millions of people bought the record. And when I was at school, a lot of people didn't really like music very much, and judging by today's charts, that's still the case. But the only question you'd really ask someone if you met them today is, what sort of music do you like? What a triumph for the music industry. What a triumph for show business. As a communist, the only music I ever listen to is of course by the Red Army Ensemble. I'm very fond of their version of the Birdie song. Now, when it comes to music, I actually have very Catholic taste, by which I don't mean the Pope doing rap. Oh, incidentally, if you play most Christian music backwards, it sounds a lot better actually, just a little tip there. Now, the idea of some types of music being cool and other types of music being old-fashioned, well, that's driven by the economic imperative to keep selling new products. We're surrounded by music now, we're immersed in it. Everywhere we go, music is there. The only sort of sounds you can't buy is the sound of silence, although you could buy John Cage's version of that. These days, when most bands go on tour, they make far more profit from the merchandising than they do from actually playing the concerts. Incidentally, if you're interested, I've got some anti-capitalist t-shirts for sale. They're £95 each. Now, most people certainly involved in the music business still persist with this illusion, I suppose it's a self-serving illusion, that there's a battle going on between idealistic musicians and cynical business people. But why should that be the case? The music business actually sells simulation. Most bands are perfectly willing accomplices. If you think about it, if you're really interested in punk music or DIY music, then the real punk bands, the real DIY bands would probably be ones that we'd never heard of. In the late 1970s, I used to organise concerts for Rock Against Careerism, and unfortunately very few bands ever turned up. Now, in the late 1970s, early 80s, I did have a band called Missing Persons, and if you're interested, I've put some information about them, various releases, etc., in my channel comments box. What follows is a true story. In those days, believe it or not, Virgin was seen as a somewhat alternative company, and there was some interest in us, which we weren't particularly interested in, although we were interested to hear what they had to say, from Virgin Records. So a couple of us went down to meet an A&R man, which is people who sign bands for record companies, from Virgin Records in London. And it was a very interesting conversation. He'd heard some of our music, obviously, and he played through some of the tracks that he liked, and he picked out two in particular, which were very different. We used to play in a lot of different styles. And having established that I was the songwriter with the band, he asked me to go away, choose one of those songs. He didn't actually care which of those two songs, and they were quite radically different, and then write a dozen songs in a similar vein. And this struck me as an entirely pointless exercise, but then he said, well, look at it from a company point of view. We have to know how to market a band. We have to know what style of music it's supposed to be, what the album cover's supposed to look like, which reviewers to send it to, which sections of a record shop it should go in, etc., etc. And of course, from a marketing, from a packaging point of view, that was entirely correct. All experiences have to be neatly packaged under capitalism. Now, one of the reasons for the persisting popularity of things like music festivals and, of course, concerts is that we all have a natural human urge to gather together. We're social beings. We long to share mutual experiences. And what capitalism does is to take something which is naturally ours and then package it and sell it back to us. Now, I'd like to finish with my latest single. It's called If You Tolerate This. The album will be next. Now, actually, I'm going to finish with my rock and roll variation of the chant which I've done in the videos on sex and the video on drugs. And this is a little chant you can perform for yourself or to other people if you suddenly find yourself caught up in a moral panic. And it goes something like this. It's none of my business. It's none of your business. It's none of his business. It's none of her business. It's none of our business. It's none of the business. Although you could do the sort of rock and roll hand jive version. It's none of my business. It's none of your, or whatever. Or you could do the heavy metal. It's none of my business. It's none of your business. Remember, the main enemy is in the house. Bye.